Hello, everyone. Let's start healing. Let's start healing is something I cannot help but say given my Let's Start Healing podcast. But I am here today to introduce you to a new podcast inside A Course in Miracles, which is an extension of Let's Start Healing. A Course in Miracles is a spiritual study that is near and dear to my heart that I have talked about on Let's Start Healing. And it is a book, a very thick book. This is the book. Many people know about the book. It's about 1,000+ pages. Many people know about this book, and then there's many people who don't. But it is a spiritual study, and Marianne Williamson, who has written about this book and mentioned it in many of her own books, describes it as a spiritual study or a book of universal spiritual themes. And I find that to be 1,000% true. It is, for me, also a book of love. It is a book that speaks to how we are love and only love because we are children of God. We were created in the mind of God. And what this book does and says is that we can be nothing else but love. And when we do uh, horrible things, or when we think horrible things about ourselves or others, it is simply a matter of forgetting who we are. Because if we knew who we are, when we have that inclination to do such a thing that is deemed bad or terrible, or when we think negative things about ourselves, we forgive ourselves. We have the ability to forgive ourselves and forgive our fellow man. This book is uh, it's everything to me because it is before I discovered it, before I came across it, it was what I always thought on a much smaller level. And so when I discovered the book, I was like, wow, wow. And it's a very healing book. So the way that it came about, very briefly, is I figure that it must have been written in the 60s, in the late 60s. It was published in the 1970s, and it came through a professor of psychology at Columbia University and her colleague, who was also a professor of psychology. Her name is Helen, or was Helen Schuckman. His name, William Thetford. And they were colleagues, excuse me, they were colleagues who just didn't get along. And I know that you know how that can be, where at some point in time you work with someone where it's just terrible. It's just like, ugh. And so they had this antagonistic relationship. And he said, according to A Course in Miracles, he said, there must be another way. You know, he was just tired of this. And so she said that she agreed and she was willing to help him find another way. Well, later, she was introduced to this voice. This voice came to her that wasn't a sound. It was, from what I've read, it was in her spirit. It was a voice in her spirit, her spirit and her higher self. And it told her, this is A Course in Miracles, take notes. And she wasn't a particularly spiritual person by any means, from what I understand. And yet this spiritual study came through her, which is very, very interesting and fascinating to me. Um, Something that comes up in this book is that none of us are special, which we will get to that later on. So she started writing down what this voice was saying to her, and then she read it to William Thetford, and then he started typing it up. And through the course of time and years, this became A Course in Miracles. The voice in this book is Jesus, and it is very interesting on many levels because this book attracts people from all different faiths and backgrounds. People who obviously don't believe in Jesus, or maybe they grew up in a household where that was a blasphemous word and name to speak. But the Jesus in this book is not our traditional Jesus that we might know through Christianity. This Jesus is even more expansive than the Jesus that many of us were raised to know. This Jesus in this book says that he is just like you and just like me, and that he is our brother. And the only difference between him and you and me is that this knowing of God and love and willingness to know who he is all that he knows. Whereas we obviously have a lot of disbelief and a lot of self doubt. And that is not the Jesus in this book. The Jesus in this book is our highest teacher, Jesus and the Holy Spirit, who is a voice for God. And so in this book, which I'm excited and anxious about bringing uh, the content of this book to you in episodes, because it is so near and dear to my heart that sometimes when I'm writing as a writer, as a journalist about something that is so important to me on such a big level, or in this case, bringing this podcast to you on something that is everything to me personally. Uh, well, I should say, well, it can be hard, but I should say also that obviously, God or our higher power, I believe, is the most personal part of us. That relationship is the most personal part of us. And that is certainly true for me. On Let's Start Healing, I have been very transparent about many personal things, and including God, obviously, because it's a spiritual podcast. But even saying that, there is nothing more personal or intimate, I believe, for myself and all of us than that relationship that we have with who we know as God and our higher power. So, what I want to do is with this book, I am not going to go page 1, page 2, page 3, or anything like that. I am going to jump around. And that's my way with this book, because when I was introduced to it, when I discovered it and started reading it, one, it was and actually Marianne Williamson is how I discovered this book, through reading her books, because she would mention A Course in Miracles, and I'd said, well, what is this Course in Miracles? So I went to Barnes and Noble and I got the book. This was in 2005, and I started reading it, and I did start at the beginning pages, and then I jumped around because I felt like I am never going to finish this if I just start, in the beginning and go page by page. And it had me so curious. And also it was hard to read for me at first. It's hard for me to imagine that now, but at first I would have to read the book out loud uh, by myself, actually, obviously, but I would have to read it out loud so I could digest what it was saying because it seemed almost like I was reading a foreign language in some ways. It is said to be written in iambic pentameter. If you're familiar with that, uh, I can't say. I'm not uh, knowledgeable around iambic pentameter and poetry in that way. It is said to be written in that way, but it is a beautifully written book. It's very healing. And uh, myself and others that I know who have studied this book, you could have something on your heart and you could be just contemplating something on your heart or talking to God in your spirit, and then open this book, and it will land on something that is speaking exactly to what is on your mind and heart. And what this book says in the very, very beginning is that it is really trying to open you and I up to our own internal teacher, our own internal spiritual voice of God inside of us. And that is where we find truth. So, what I'm going to do is just share a little bit with you. And I am going to read, just run through, when I say read, some principles of miracles that are in the beginning of the book. And the book, uh, miracles, for me, I never know how people are going to receive that word. So often I will say blessings because they are one and the same. We are talking about blessings and miracles. In A Course in Miracles transcend time. They uh, There's no order of difficulty in miracles. That's a big quote in the book. Uh, we can want something to happen. We can have some conflict that we want resolved. And we can say, well, that can't happen because of this, or that it can't happen because of that. Well, miracles or blessings, when it comes to God, transcend time. And there is no order of difficulty in miracles. So I'm going to run through a few of these for now. And there are 50 listed, and I'm only going to read a handful or run through them. As I said, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. One is one is not harder or bigger than the other. They're all the same. All expressions of love are maximal. Miracles as such do not matter. The only thing that matters is their source, which is far beyond evaluation. They occur naturally. These blessings occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. All miracles mean life, and God is the giver of life. His voice will direct you specifically. You will be told all you need to know. They're habits. Miracles are habits and involuntary, and they come through us. It's when we try to create the miracle and be the dictator of the miracle that miracles can be misguided. It says consciously selected miracles are misguided, can be misguided. When miracles do not occur, something has gone wrong because miracles are natural. Everyone has a right to miracles, but purification is necessary. And that means getting in touch with our connection to God or our higher power. Miracles are healing because they supply a lack. They are performed by people who temporarily have more than those who temporarily have less. So they're performed by people who temporarily have more for people who temporarily have less. They're kind of an exchange. Like all expressions of love, which are always miraculous in the true sense, the exchange reverses physical laws. They bring love both to the giver and the receiver. They give love to both the giver and the receiver. I want to speak to that, but I'll speak to it later. The use of miracles as spectacles to induce belief is a misunderstanding of their purpose. So, like, well, let me prove it to you and, show you this miracle. That is a misunderstanding of their purpose. Prayer is a medium for miracles. It means a communication with our Creator. Through prayer, love is received, and through miracles, love is expressed. They are thoughts. Miracles are thoughts that can represent our body level, which is the lower level, or our higher spiritual level. One makes the physical, and the other creates the spiritual. We are all here for each other. We are all to give to each other and learn from each other and heal and help each other to heal. When I first read this book, I thought it was such a compliment to the Bible. And at the same time, for some people, it can be blasphemous because it is a different interpretation of what we might have learned. It's more expansive from what we might have learned traditionally. And so it says in here, and it speaks to forgiveness. As I mentioned before, it speaks to how if we can forgive ourselves, if we can forgive ourselves for whatever we think we did, then we can forgive somebody else. It's almost like, I understand why you did that, or it's a non-issue, or or there is a grace. If we can forgive ourselves, then we're able to give grace to somebody else. Things come up for me as I'm saying this to you because it's something that I know this so well, and this can be true for me in 1,000 ways. And then there's a 1,001 instant. That 1,001 instant, I may not have that grace. Someone may push my buttons. I may be standing in my ego, and I may not have the grace to forgive someone. So it says in here, miracle minded forgiveness is only correction. It has no element of judgment at all. The statement, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, in no way evaluates what that person did. It is an appeal to God to heal their minds. There is no reference to the outcome of the error. That does not matter. The injunction, be of one mind, is the statement for revelation readiness. My request, do this in remembrance of me, is the appeal for cooperation for miracle workers. According to this book, timelessness belongs to God. In time, we exist for each other. So in this world, in this form, we exist for each other. In timelessness, we coexist with God. Isn't that so deep? In timelessness, we coexist with God. Wayne Dyer, the late Wayne Dyer, used to say, we are God. We are God. So if I am or you are an extension of God, you are God. If God is love and he created you and I as love, in love, we are love. God is love. We are God as an extension of God. We didn't create God, God created us, but he is a part of us and he is inside of us. So it says here, you can do much on behalf of your own healing, and that of others. And there's this prayer. In a situation calling for help, think of it this way. And the prayer says, I am only here to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do because he who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me. I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal. We give to each other, we receive from each other, we heal each other if we're willing to. If we're willing to. And according to this book, it only takes a little bit of willingness. And if we make a mistake, as I mentioned, it could be 1,000 times where I understand the concept of this book. And I might live in that space. And then something could happen. I could flip a switch. Somebody could push a button, poke me in some way. And then I'm not offering that grace. But the thing is, we can choose again. Just choose again and have self-forgiveness. And if I can forgive myself, then I can forgive you. If you can forgive yourself, you can forgive me. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here for episode 1 of Inside A Course in Miracles. And I will see you soon and share more.